Jake Morrison walked through the massive hallways of Nexus Prime, the biggest space station in the galaxy. His footsteps echoed on the metal floors as he made his way to the council chambers. As Earth's ambassador to the Galactic Council, Jake had seen many strange things in his 3 years here, but today felt different. The space station floated in orbit around Zentara, the capital world of the galaxy. Through the huge windows, Jake could see ships from hundreds of different worlds coming and going. Some looked like crystals that flew through space. Others were made of pure energy. A few looked almost normal, except they were the size of cities. Jake reached the council chambers and stopped at the entrance. The doors were 50 feet tall and made of some kind of metal that changed colors. When they opened, the sound was like thunder rolling across mountains. Inside, the chamber was enormous. It could hold representatives from over 300 different species, and today it looked full. Jake found his seat in the section marked for newer species. Humans had only been part of the galactic community for 20 years, which made them babies compared to some of the other races. The Saurans had been here for 10,000 years. The Voidlings claimed they were older than the galaxy itself. At the center of the chamber stood a platform made of floating crystal. On it sat Chancellor Vexthul, the leader of the Galactic Council. Vexthul looked like a living mountain of purple crystal, with lights that flashed inside when he spoke. His voice came from everywhere at once thanks to the translation machines that turned his crystal language into sounds other species could understand. "The council will come to order," Vexthul announced. The chamber fell silent immediately. Even with hundreds of different species present, when the Chancellor spoke, everyone listened. Jake noticed that many of the older species were looking at him today. The reptile-like Saurans kept turning their yellow eyes in his direction. The mechanical cognites, who looked like walking computers, had their sensors pointed at him. Even the ghostly voidlings seemed to be paying attention to the human section. "Today we address a matter of great importance," Vexthul continued. "The species known as humanity has reached the threshold for full council obligations." Jake felt his stomach drop. He had been afraid this day would come, but hoped it would be years away. The threshold meant that humans were now considered advanced enough to pay tribute to the older species. It was how the galaxy had worked for thousands of years. Vexthul's crystal body flashed brighter as he spoke. "For 3,000 years, the tribute system has maintained peace across the galaxy. Newer species contribute to the wisdom and resources of the established ones. In return, the older species provide protection and guidance." A hologram appeared above the platform, showing the numbers that would change everything for humanity. Jake read them and felt sick. The council wanted 30% of all human industrial output. They wanted 20% of all food humans produced. But the worst part was at the bottom of the list. 1 million humans per year will relocate to council territories for cultural exchange and workforce development, Vexthul announced. Jake knew what that really meant. 1 million humans would become slaves every year. They would work in the mines of distant worlds, serve in the houses of alien nobles, or disappear into the vast machines that kept the galactic economy running. Around the chamber, representatives from different species began to stand and speak. The translation machines worked overtime as dozens of languages filled the air at once. A Sauran delegate stood first. His scales were bright green, marking him as a military commander. "The Sauran Empire supports this motion," he hissed. "We have followed these traditions for millennia. Every species must contribute to the greater good." Next came a voidling, its ghostly form flickering in and out of reality. "The cosmic balance requires this tribute," it whispered, its voice like wind through empty space. "Humanity has taken much from the galaxy. Now they must give back." A cognite representative activated its speakers. "Probability calculations confirm the fairness of these requirements," it announced in a voice like computer static. "Human contribution levels match established patterns for species of similar development." One by one, more species stood to support the motion. The crystalline lattice builders spoke of tradition. The gaseous nebula singers hummed about harmony. The aquatic deeplings gurgled their approval. Each speaker seemed to assume that humans would accept the tribute demand without question. Jake watched it all with growing anger. These species talked about tradition and fairness, but they were really talking about slavery. They wanted to take human freedom and call it cooperation. They wanted to steal human lives and call it cultural exchange. As the speeches continued, Jake thought about Earth. He pictured the cities where billions of humans lived free lives. He thought about the farms where families grew food for their own children. He remembered the factories where humans built things because they chose to, not because alien masters forced them to. He also thought about the secret messages he had received from Admiral Lisa Parker back on Earth. The Human Defense Initiative had been preparing for this day. They had built new ships, developed new weapons, and created technologies the Council knew nothing about. But all of that would mean nothing if Earth's own ambassador agreed to make humans slaves. Chancellor Vexthal's crystal form turned toward Jake. "Ambassador Morrison," the Chancellor said, his voice filling the chamber. "The Council calls upon humanity to respond to these requirements." Jake stood slowly. Around him, hundreds of alien eyes focused on the lone human. Some looked curious, others looked bored. Most looked like they expected him to say yes and start negotiating the details. After all, every species before humanity had done exactly that. The chamber fell completely silent. Even the air recycling system seemed to stop making noise. Jake could hear his own heartbeat as he looked around at the most powerful beings in the galaxy. Diplomatic protocol required a formal response. He was supposed to thank the Council for their wisdom, acknowledge their authority, and begin discussing terms. He was supposed to ask for time to consult with Earth's government. He was supposed to negotiate for better conditions, maybe a lower percentage or fewer people. Instead, Jake Morrison took a deep breath and spoke the word that would change galactic history forever. No. The word hung in the air like a bomb waiting to explode. In 3,000 years of Council history, no species had ever given such a simple, direct refusal. Jake had not said they needed time to think. He had not asked to negotiate different terms. He had not even said they respectfully declined. He had simply said no, and he meant it completely. The silence in the Council chamber lasted exactly 3 seconds. Then chaos exploded across the massive room like a bomb going off. Chancellor Vexthal's crystal body flickered wildly, the lights inside flashing faster than they ever had before. His voice came out as a confused buzz through the translation machines. "What did the human say?" he asked, though everyone had heard perfectly clearly. Jake Morrison stood calmly in his section, looking directly at the Chancellor. Around him, hundreds of alien delegates started shouting, hissing, buzzing, and making whatever sounds their species used to express shock and anger. "I said no," Jake repeated, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber's speakers. "Humanity rejects your tribute demand. We will not give you our resources. We will not give you our people. We will not bow to your threats." A Soren commander jumped to his feet, his scales turning bright red with rage. "This is impossible," he roared. "No species refuses the Council." "It has never happened." The Voidling representative flickered in and out of reality so fast it looked like a broken light. "The Cosmic Order demands compliance," it whispered urgently. "Refusal brings chaos to the universe." But Jake just shook his head. "We reject your entire system. Humans will not be slaves, no matter what you call it. Our answer is no, and it will always be no." The chamber erupted again, this time even louder. Some delegates screamed in languages the translation machines could not handle. Others made sounds that hurt to hear. A few species simply stared at Jake like he had grown a second head. In the middle of all the noise, Chancellor Vexthal raised one massive crystal arm. The chamber slowly fell quiet, though many delegates continued to mutter and whisper. "Ambassador Morrison," the Chancellor said carefully, "perhaps you do not understand the consequences of your words." Jake smiled, and it was not a friendly smile. "I understand perfectly. You're threatening us. You think we'll be scared and change our minds, but you're wrong about humans. When we say no, we mean it." Back on Earth, Admiral Lisa Parker sat in the deep command center beneath the Pentagon. Banks of screens showed her everything that was happening in the galaxy, including the live feed from the Council chamber. When she heard Jake's words, she smiled and turned to her staff. "That's our signal," she said. "Send the activation codes to all ships. It's time to show the galaxy what humans can really do." Across human space, the message spread faster than light itself. On Mars, Dr. Bobby Turner sat in a secret laboratory that officially did not exist. Around him, machines hummed with power as they activated the quantum communication network that had taken 20 years to build. The quantum network was humanity's greatest secret. While other species used normal radio signals that took years to cross space, humans had learned to connect their minds and machines instantly across any distance. Every human ship, Every human colony, every human military base was now connected as if they were all in the same room. On the lunar defense platform, Captain Nancy Williams watched her screens light up with messages from across the solar system. Human ships that had been hidden in asteroid fields suddenly revealed themselves. Weapons that had been disguised as mining equipment powered up for the first time. Defense stations that had pretended to be scientific research posts dropped their fake covers. The Sol system had looked almost defenseless to alien observers. Now it bristled with weapons and ships that had been hiding in plain sight for decades. Colonel Steve Martinez commanded the secret base on Europa, one of Jupiter's moons. His facility had been listed as an ice mining operation for 15 years. In reality, it was the most advanced military production center in human space. As the activation codes arrived, thousands of workers dropped their disguises and began loading weapons onto ships that had been built in hidden underground factories. Dr. Turner watched data flow through the quantum network like water through pipes. Every human military commander could now see what every other commander was seeing. Every pilot could coordinate with every other pilot as if they shared the same brain. Every ship could strike at the same target at exactly the same moment, even if they were light years apart. It was something no other species in the galaxy had ever achieved. The Cognites were too mechanical to really work together. The Saurans were too proud to truly cooperate. The Voidlings were too alien to understand teamwork. But humans had learned to think as one while still keeping their individual creativity and independence. Back in the council chamber, delegates continued to shout and argue. Some demanded immediate military action against humanity. Others suggested trying to negotiate. A few wise species quietly began to wonder if they had made a terrible mistake. Jake Morrison listened to it all with calm confidence. He knew what was happening back home. He knew about the ships powering up, the weapons activating, and the defenses coming online. But more importantly, he knew something about humans that the aliens had never learned. When humans said no, they meant it. When humans made a promise, they kept it. And when humans decided to fight for their freedom, they would fight until the end of the universe if necessary. Chancellor Vex Thol tried one more time to restore order. The Council has been generous in its terms, he announced. Perhaps humanity requires time to consider the wisdom of cooperation. Jake shook his head again. We don't need time. We don't need to consider anything. Our answer was no yesterday, it's no today, and it will be no tomorrow. Humans are not tribute. Humans are not slaves. We are free beings, and we will stay free. The alien delegates fell silent at the certainty in Jake's voice. For 3,000 years, every species had eventually agreed to pay tribute. Some had negotiated for better terms. Some had asked for more time. Some had tried to find alternatives. But in the end, they had all submitted to the Council's power. Now, for the first time in galactic history, a species was simply refusing to submit at all. The Sauran War Minister stood up, his scales now black with rage. Then you choose war, he hissed. The Council's fleets will turn your worlds to ash. Your people will learn the price of defiance. Jake looked directly at the War Minister and smiled again. Let them come, he said quietly. Humans have been fighting for freedom since we climbed down from trees. We're really good at it by now. In the command center on Earth, Admiral Parker watched the Galactic News Network struggle to report what had happened. For the first time in thousands of years, someone had told the Galactic Council no and meant it. The galaxy was about to learn what that word really meant to humans. 2 days after Jake Morrison spoke his defiant word, the largest military fleet in galactic history appeared at the edge of the Sol system. 300 massive warships dropped out of faster-than-light travel in perfect formation, their weapons already charging for battle. Admiral Fleet Commander Zarketh stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Inevitability. The ship was larger than Earth's moon and carried enough firepower to crack planets in half. Zarketh belonged to the Hegemony, a species that had conquered 17 solar systems before joining the Council. His forearms moved across control panels while his 6 eyes studied the tactical displays. Scan the system, Zarketh ordered his crew. Show me what these humans think they can do against the combined might of the galaxy. The sensors swept across the Sol system and found exactly what the Hegemony Admiral expected. 60 human ships rose to meet his fleet, most of them smaller than the Council's escort vessels. They looked primitive and weak, like insects trying to fight eagles. Captain Pete Collins stood on the bridge of the carrier ship Liberty, humanity's flagship. Around him, his crew worked with quiet efficiency, their movements coordinated by the quantum communication network that connected every human mind in the fleet. Pete could feel the thoughts and emotions of every captain, every pilot, every gunner in the human fleet. "Admiral Parker sends her regards," the communications officer reported. "All human forces are ready and waiting for your orders." Pete nodded as he studied the alien fleet on his screens. The enemy ships were beautiful in their own terrible way. Some looked like living creatures made of metal and crystal. Others were geometric shapes that hurt to look at directly. A few seemed to be made of pure energy held together by force fields. "They think we're going to surrender when we see how powerful they are," Pete said to his crew. "They're about to learn that humans don't surrender." Aboard the Inevitability, Zarketh opened a communication channel to the human fleet. His voice, translated into English, boomed across space. "Humans of Earth, you face the combined fleets of 12 species. We have weapons that can destroy worlds. We have shields that have never been broken. Surrender now and your deaths will be quick." Pete Collins activated his own transmitter and spoke for all humanity. "Admiral Zarketh, this is Captain Collins of the Earth Defense Force. We received your threat. Our response is the same as our ambassador gave to your council. No." The alien admiral's mandibles clicked together in what might have been laughter. "Then you choose destruction. Begin the advance." The council fleet moved forward in perfect formation, their ships arranged in patterns that had conquered 1,000 worlds. They advanced slowly, giving the humans time to see their doom approaching and change their minds. It was psychological warfare as much as military strategy. But the human ships did something unexpected. Instead of retreating or forming defensive lines, they scattered in all directions. Some dove toward the asteroid belt, others raced toward Jupiter's moons. A few headed straight for the sun. To the aliens, it looked like panic and chaos. Dr. Bobby Turner watched the battle from his command center on Mars, his consciousness connected to every human ship through the quantum network. What looked like chaos to the aliens was actually the most sophisticated battle coordination in galactic history. Every human pilot knew exactly where every other pilot was going and why. The first clash came near the asteroid belt. Human ships darted between the floating rocks like fish swimming through coral reefs. The alien ships followed, their massive hulls smashing through asteroids that the smaller human vessels slipped around easily. Zarketh watched his formations break apart as they tried to follow the human ships through the asteroid field. "Clever insects," he muttered, "but speed will not save you from our weapons." The council ships opened fire with weapons that could melt moons. Beams of pure energy, clouds of antimatter, and projectiles moving at nearly the speed of light filled space with deadly light. But the human ships seemed to know exactly where each shot was going before it was fired. Through the quantum network, every human pilot shared the same tactical picture. When one ship detected an incoming missile, every ship knew about it instantly. When one captain spotted a weak point in an alien vessel, every other captain could see it too. The humans fought like a single organism with 60 bodies. Captain Amy Foster piloted her destroyer through a gap between 2 asteroids, 3 alien fighters chasing her. At the exact moment she cleared the rocks, 12 other human ships opened fire from concealment. The alien fighters vanished in explosions of light and metal. "Target down," Amy reported through the quantum link, moving to assist Collins with the heavy cruiser. Across the battlefield, similar scenes played out dozens of times. Human ships would lead aliens into traps or coordinate attacks that struck from multiple directions at once. The Council fleet found itself fighting an enemy that seemed to read their minds. But the aliens had overwhelming firepower. Human ships began to die despite their coordination and speed. The destroyer Courage exploded when a Sauran battleship caught it in open space. The cruiser Independence broke apart under fire from a Cognite dreadnought. Captain Pete Collins watched his friends die and felt their loss through the quantum network. Every human death was felt by every other human in the fleet. But instead of weakening them, the shared grief made them stronger and more determined. "All ships, this is Collins," he broadcast. "Execute Pattern Omega. Target the Inevitability." Pattern Omega was something humans had practiced in secret for years, but never used in real combat. Every human ship, no matter where they were in the solar system, would attack the same target at exactly the same moment. Dr. Turner coordinated the attack from Mars, his quantum computers calculating timing down to nanoseconds. Human ships raced toward the enemy flagship from dozens of different directions. Some came from behind asteroids, others emerged from Jupiter's radiation belts. A few had been hiding in the shadow of Earth's moon. Zarkith watched the human ships converge on his position, with something that might have been respect. "Brave little creatures," he said. But the inevitability has never fallen to enemy fire. The human fleet struck all at once. 60 ships fired their weapons at exactly the same spot on the massive alien flagship, a tiny weak point where two armor plates joined together. Individually, their weapons were too weak to damage such a powerful ship. But concentrated together, fired at precisely the same instant, they punched through shields that had withstood the bombardment of entire fleets. The explosion that followed lit up the entire solar system. The inevitability, pride of the hegemony fleet, broke apart like a toy hit by a hammer. Pieces of the massive ship tumbled through space, some still burning with alien fire. In the sudden silence that followed, Captain Pete Collins opened a channel to the remaining Council fleet. "This is Captain Collins to all alien vessels. The next ship that threatens Earth will share the same fate. You have 10 minutes to leave our system." The surviving Council ships held their positions for exactly 9 minutes and 30 seconds. Then, without another word, they activated their faster-than-light drives and vanished back into deep space. Aboard the Liberty, Pete Collins smiled as he watched the alien fleet retreat. Around him, his crew cheered and celebrated their impossible victory. Through the quantum network, he could feel the joy of every human in the fleet, in the system, and across all of human space. They had done something that no species in galactic history had ever accomplished. They had defeated a Council tribute fleet and lived to tell about it. But Pete knew this was only the beginning. The galaxy had learned that humans meant what they said when they spoke that simple word, no. Now the real war would begin. The news of humanity's victory spread across the galaxy faster than anyone thought possible. On 1,000 worlds, in 1,000,000 cities, across countless species, beings looked up at the stars and felt something they had forgotten existed. Hope. On the water world of Abyssos, a young deepling named Coral swam through the underwater cities where her people had lived as slaves for 3 centuries. The mining platforms above extracted precious metals from the ocean floor, poisoning the water and killing the coral reefs that were sacred to her species. Coral had grown up believing that resistance was impossible. The Council's ships were too powerful, their weapons too advanced, their fleets too large. But now she floated in the central plaza of her city, watching the holographic news displays with wonder. "The humans said no," she whispered to her friend Current, her words creating bubbles in the water around them. "They actually said no to the Council, and won." Current's tentacles flickered with excitement. "The news feeds say they destroyed the flagship of the tribute fleet. The inevitability, the ship that conquered the hegemony's 17 systems, is gone." Around them, other deeplings gathered to watch the news. For the first time in generations, they began to speak quietly about freedom, about resistance, about the possibility that their children might swim in clean oceans again. On the crystal world of Laticus Prime, the beings known as lattice builders worked in their vast construction yards, creating the space stations and stargates that held the galactic economy together. They were masters of engineering, capable of building structures larger than planets, but they had been slaves to the Council for so long that freedom seemed like a fairy tale. Builder Prime Unit 7742, who had once been named Harmony before the Council took away personal names, watched the human victory on her workstation's display. Around her, thousands of other builders stopped their work to stare at the impossible images. "They fought the Council and lived," Harmony whispered to her work partner. "A species with primitive technology defeated ships that our own people built." The work partner, once called Symphony, flickered with nervous energy. "The overseers will punish us if we do not continue working." But Harmony looked around at the massive space station they were building, another link in the chain that bound the galaxy in slavery. "What if we stopped?" she asked quietly. "What if we all stopped at the same time, in the gas clouds of the Nebula Reach?" The singers floated through their ethereal cities, their voices carrying communications across the galaxy at faster-than-light speeds. They were the galaxy's telephone system, but they had never been allowed to choose what messages they carried. Singer of Dawn Winds heard the human victory broadcast and felt her heart soar with harmonies she had not sung in decades. Around her, other singers began to hum melodies of hope and defiance. For the first time in 1,000 years, they considered what would happen if they simply stopped carrying the council's messages. But the real shockwaves were felt in the council chambers themselves. Emergency sessions convened as delegates from the ruling species tried to understand how their perfect system had been broken by a single word. The Cognite delegation ran probability calculations that made their mechanical minds spark with confusion. The mathematical impossibility of this outcome suggests fundamental errors in our understanding of human psychology, their speaker announced, its voice crackling with static. The Sauran war minister paced back and forth, his scales flashing between red and black. "One battle means nothing," he hissed. "We have 1,000 fleets. We will crush them with overwhelming numbers." But Chancellor Vexthul's crystal form was flickering with uncertainty. In 3,000 years of leadership, he had never faced a crisis like this. The tribute system was not just about collecting resources, it was about maintaining the psychological dominance that kept hundreds of species in line. "The danger is not military," the Chancellor said slowly. "The danger is that other species will hear of this victory and believe they too can resist." He was right to be worried. On worlds across the galaxy, beings who had never dared to dream of freedom suddenly began to organize. Resistance cells formed on mining worlds. Slave laborers in the great factories began to sabotage production lines. Even on the capital worlds, trusted servants started to whisper about rebellion. On Earth, President Karen Adams stood before the United Nations and addressed not just humanity, but the watching galaxy. Her speech was broadcast on every frequency, translated into every language and heard by billions of beings across space. "My fellow humans, and all free beings of the galaxy," she began, her voice steady and strong. "Today we proved that freedom is not something you ask for. It is something you take and defend. We told the Council no because we meant it, and we will always mean it." She paused, looking directly into the cameras that would carry her words to distant stars. "To every species that suffers under tribute and slavery, we say this: you are not alone. Every being has the right to self-determination. Every species has the right to choose its own destiny, and humanity will help any people who ask for our assistance in claiming their independence." The response was immediate and overwhelming. The Human Defense Initiative received thousands of communications from across the galaxy. Most were requests for help, sent through secret channels that the Council did not monitor. Others were warnings about Council retaliation plans. But many were simply messages of gratitude from beings who had never expected to see Defiance succeed. Dr. Bobby Turner worked around the clock to expand the quantum communication network, creating secure channels that allowed resistance groups across the galaxy to coordinate their efforts. For the first time, beings on worlds hundreds of light years apart could plan together in real time. On the prison world of Torment, where the Council sent political dissidents from dozens of species, an old Xerillian named Peace Seeker stood before a crowd of prisoners from 30 different worlds. He had been imprisoned for 50 years for the crime of suggesting that his people deserved freedom. "Brothers and sisters," he said, his voice carrying to every being in the vast prison yard. "The humans have shown us that the Council can be defeated. They have proven that the word no still has power in this galaxy." The crowd listened in absolute silence as Peace Seeker continued. "Tomorrow, when the guards come for the morning work detail, we will give them the same answer the humans gave to the Council. We will say no, and we will mean it." The prison uprising began at dawn the next day and spread to every detention facility in Council space within a week. Guards who had terrorized prisoners for decades found themselves facing beings who were no longer afraid. The word no became a battle cry that echoed across the galaxy. Back in the Council chambers, panic spread among the ruling species. The Voidlings suggested erasing humanity from time itself, using their mastery of temporal manipulation to make the human victory never happen. The Saurans demanded immediate military action to crush every rebellion before it could spread further, but it was already too late to contain the damage quietly. Jake Morrison's single word had become the most powerful force in galactic politics. Underground networks broadcast the recording of his defiant speech on frequencies the Council could not block. Resistance cells adopted "No" as their universal password. Even some of the Council's own member species began to question the system they had helped create. The peaceful gardener species, who had submitted willingly to protect their botanical worlds, started to wonder if cooperation had become collaboration with oppression. In the deep space between stars, merchant ships that had carried tribute for generations began to change course. Some simply vanished, their crews deciding to seek new lives rather than continue serving a system they no longer believed in. Others arrived at their destinations with mysterious damage to their cargo holds. Captain Pete Collins, now promoted to admiral after his victory at Sol, led the first joint human-alien fleet to the Xerelian colonies. Alongside his human ships flew vessels crewed by escaped deeplings, rebel lattice builders, and freed prisoners from a dozen worlds. They were no longer fighting alone. The galaxy was changing, and everyone could feel it. The old order of tribute and slavery was cracking like ice in spring. Species that had been enemies for millennia found themselves working together against their common oppressors. The Council's perfect system was falling apart, brought down by the simple power of a single word. On distant worlds, alien children who had never known freedom began to learn what the word "no" really meant. Parents who had never dared to hope began to tell their young ones stories about choice and independence. The revolution had begun with one human standing before the most powerful force in the galaxy and refusing to submit. Now millions of beings, across hundreds of worlds, were learning to speak that same word of defiance. The galaxy would never be the same again. The final confrontation between the old and new galaxy did not come as a massive battle with fleets covering the stars. Instead, it came as a flood of defections that the Council could not stop or even slow down. Chancellor Vexthol stood in the emergency command center deep within Nexus Prime, watching reports flood in from across Council space. His crystal form flickered with stress patterns that had never been seen before in his species. "Report," he commanded his staff, though he already knew the news would be terrible. A cognite officer activated the holographic displays that showed the collapse of galactic civilization as they knew it. "The lattice builders have abandoned all construction projects," the mechanical being announced. 17 major space stations have gone dark. The trade routes between the core worlds are breaking down. Another officer, this one a nervous Soren, added his own bad news. "The Nebula Singers have cut off all communications to Council worlds. We cannot coordinate our fleets across more than a single star system now." But the worst news came from the military command. "Sir," reported a voidling who seemed to be fading in and out of reality faster than usual, 43 of our member species have refused to contribute ships to the final assault fleet. Some have declared neutrality, others have openly joined the rebellion." Vexthol's crystal body went completely dark for a moment, something that had never happened in the 3,000 years of his rule. When the lights came back, they were dim and flickering. The mighty Chancellor of the Galactic Council looked old and tired for the first time in his very long life. Across the galaxy, the revolution was happening everywhere at once. On the water world of Abyssos, the young deepling named Coral swam through mining platforms that had been abandoned by their alien overseers. Her people were already beginning to repair the damage done to their reefs over 3 centuries of exploitation. "The water tastes clean again," she told her friend Current, as they swam through coral gardens that were beginning to bloom with new life. "For the first time since my great-grandmother was young, the ocean is healing." On the crystal world of Laticus Prime, the being once known as Harmony led her fellow builders in the greatest construction project of their lives. Instead of building another space station for their oppressors, they were creating something new. A massive communications array that would allow free species to coordinate without the Council's control. "We spent so many centuries building cages for ourselves and others," Harmony said to her work partner Symphony, as they shaped crystalline circuits with their minds. "Now we build the tools of freedom." In the gas clouds of the Nebula Reach, the singers had begun a new kind of song. Instead of carrying the Council's messages of domination and control, they sang harmonies of hope and cooperation across the galaxy. Their music reached worlds the Council had never even known existed, spreading the revolution to species that had hidden in distant corners of space. Admiral Lisa Parker stood on the bridge of humanity's newest ship, the Freedom, as it led a combined fleet toward the galactic core. Around her flew vessels from dozens of species, all working together toward the same goal. Humans had taught the galaxy how to say no, but the other species had taught humans new ways to work together. "Ma'am," reported Captain Pete Collins from his position at the tactical station, "the Council's final defense fleet is taking position around Zentara. It looks like they're making their last stand." Lisa nodded as she studied the tactical displays. The Council had assembled every ship they could still command, but it was a pale shadow of their former might. Half their member species had refused to fight. The other half seemed to be participating more out of habit than conviction. "Open a channel to the Council fleet," Lisa ordered. "Let's give them one last chance to do this the easy way." The communication beam reached across space to the bridge of the Council's flagship, where Admiral Zarketh had survived the destruction of the Inevitability and been given command of the final defense. His forearms worked nervously across his control panels as he accepted the human transmission. "Admiral Zarketh," Lisa's voice came through the translation systems. "This is Admiral Parker of the Free Galaxy Alliance. We're offering you the same choice we gave your Council. Surrender now and you can help us build something better, or fight, and share the same fate as your old system." Zarketh looked around his bridge at crew members from 6 different species. A few months ago, they would have fought to the death for the Council. Now he could see doubt and exhaustion in every face. They were tired of fighting for a system that kept most of the galaxy in chains. "Admiral Parker," Zarketh replied slowly, "what assurance do we have that you will treat defeated enemies with honor?" Lisa smiled, though he could not see it. "The same assurance we've given every species that has joined us. Freedom, equality, and the right to choose your own path. No tribute, no slavery, no forcing others to bow down to you." On the bridge of the Council flagship, Zarketh's crew looked at each other with something like hope. The old system had given them power over others, but it had also made them slaves to those above them. This new way offered something different: partnership instead of domination. One by one, the ships of the Council's final fleet began to stand down. Some powered down their weapons and joined the rebel fleet. Others simply moved aside, declaring neutrality. A few turned and fled toward the edges of known space, preferring exile to facing the consequences of their actions. Within 6 hours, the mighty Galactic Council that had ruled for 3 millennia controlled nothing more than a single space station and the planet beneath it. Chancellor Vex Thule stood alone in the Council chambers, looking at empty seats where hundreds of delegates had once sat. The great holographic displays showed rebel fleets approaching from every direction. He could have fought to the end, could have activated the station's ultimate weapons and taken millions of beings with him. Instead, he did something that surprised everyone, including himself. He opened a communication channel to the approaching fleet and spoke the word that had started it all. "No," he said simply, "I will not continue this meaningless destruction. The old order is dead. Let us see what you can build to replace it." 3 months later, Jake Morrison stood once again before a galactic assembly, but this time everything was different. Instead of a chamber filled with oppressors and their victims, he addressed a gathering of equals. Representatives from hundreds of species worked together to draft a new galactic charter based on cooperation rather than domination. The document they created was simple in its principles but revolutionary in its implications. The first article stated simply, "Any being or species has the fundamental right to say no to any demand, request, or requirement that violates their freedom or dignity." Dr. Bobby Turner's quantum communication network became the foundation for a new galactic internet, connecting worlds not for the purpose of extracting tribute, but for sharing knowledge and culture freely. Scientists from dozens of species collaborated on projects that had been impossible under the old system. Captain Pete Collins, now an admiral, led the first joint exploration mission beyond the galaxy's edge. His fleet included ships and crews from 30 different species, all working together as equals to discover what lay in the vast darkness between galaxies. The old space stations that had been built to enforce Council rule were converted into research centers, hospitals, and schools. The quantum communication arrays that had once carried orders for tribute now carried art, music, and messages of friendship between distant worlds. On Earth, Children learned in school about the day when their ambassador stood before the most powerful force in the galaxy and spoke a single word that changed everything. They learned that freedom was not something you asked for politely, but something you took and defended with everything you had. But the most important change was in the hearts and minds of beings across the galaxy. Species that had been enemies for millennia discovered they could work together when neither was forced to bow to the other. Worlds that had been stripped bare by tribute demands began to heal and grow green again. The deeplings of Abyssos restored their coral reefs to even greater beauty than before. The lattice builders created structures of impossible grace that served the needs of all species. The nebula singers filled space with music that carried joy instead of sorrow. Even former council species found new purpose in the free galaxy. The cognites used their analytical abilities to solve problems that had plagued civilization for millennia. The Sorens became explorers and defenders of the weak instead of conquerors. Even the voidlings, masters of time and space, began to use their powers to heal rather than control. Years passed, and the galaxy grew stronger and more beautiful with each passing season. Trade flowed freely between worlds that chose to cooperate. Art and culture spread without restriction. Knowledge advanced faster than ever before when beings were free to think and create without fear. Jake Morrison, now an old man serving as the first elected president of the Galactic Federation, stood on the observation deck of New Harmony Station, the capital of the free galaxy. Through the vast windows he could see ships from hundreds of worlds coming and going, all traveling freely because they chose to, not because they were forced to.